On a quiet Tuesday morning, a man walked out of his house to buy a newspaper. He never came back. No footprints leading away. No car missing from the driveway. No signs of a struggle. Just a man, walking down a street he had walked 1,000 times before, and then nothing. This is the story of a disappearance that investigators still cannot explain. Let's call him Daniel. He was 42 years old, married, with 2 children still in school. He worked as an accountant at a small firm downtown. The kind of job where you know everyone's name and nobody ever raises their voice. Nothing about his life stood out. He had no debts worth mentioning, no enemies, no affairs, no gambling problem, no history of running from anything. By every account, he was a normal man living a normal life in a small, quiet town where nothing ever really happened. That morning started like any other. He woke up early, made coffee, and told his wife he was going to walk down to the corner store to grab milk and the morning paper. It was a 6-minute walk. He had done it hundreds of times, rain or shine, often before the rest of the house had even woken up. He kissed his wife goodbye at the door, stepped outside, and started down the sidewalk. At 7:42 that morning, a neighbor watering her garden saw him walking past, just like always. She said later that he even gave her his usual small wave. At 7:48, the clerk at the corner store noticed he hadn't shown up yet, which was unusual, because Daniel was a man of routine, almost to the point of habit. By 8 o'clock, his wife had called the store to ask if he was there. He wasn't. He was nowhere. 6 minutes. That is all it took for a man to vanish completely. By that afternoon, his wife had called the police. Normally, a case like this, a grown man missing for a few hours, would not raise many alarms. Adults leave sometimes. They need space, or they get delayed, or they simply forget to check in. But something about this felt different from the very beginning. And within 24 hours, this small, sleepy town had a full search underway. Volunteers walked the fields behind his house. Search dogs were brought in from 2 counties over. A helicopter circled the woods at the edge of town for most of a day. They found nothing. No footprints past a certain point on the sidewalk, as if he had simply stopped existing mid-step. No torn clothing, no blood, no sign that he had been dragged or taken by force. Perhaps strangest of all, his phone was found later that day still sitting on the charger on his nightstand. He hadn't even taken it with him, which investigators found odd, but not impossible. Some people really do leave the house without their phones, especially for a quick errand they've done 1,000 times before. Investigators began digging into every corner of his life, expecting, as they usually do in cases like this, to find something hidden. A secret debt, a second family somewhere, a person he had wronged who might have wanted revenge. But the deeper they looked, the cleaner his life appeared. Co-workers described him as reliable, almost to the point of being boring. The kind of man who brought the same lunch every day and left the office at the same time every evening. His marriage, by every account from friends and family, was stable and unremarkable in the best possible way. There was no obvious reason for a man like this to run, and there was no obvious reason for anyone to want him gone. 3 days into the investigation, the case took its first strange turn. A gas station security camera nearly 40 miles away, in a completely different town, caught footage of a man matching Daniel's exact description and clothing. In the footage, he walks into frame from the edge of the parking lot, pauses for a moment as if considering something, and then turns and walks back out of frame in the opposite direction, almost as if he had changed his mind about something at the very last second. The timestamp on that footage did not make sense. There was no bus route that could have gotten him there in the time available. No car matching any vehicle associated with him or his family had been seen on any of the roads between the 2 towns. No one had reported picking up a hitchhiker. Investigators reviewed that grainy footage dozens of times, frame by frame, trying to find something conclusive. Some detectives on the case became convinced it wasn't him at all, just a stranger of similar height and build, wearing similar clothes by pure coincidence. Others were not so sure. And to this day, opinions on that single piece of footage remain divided. Every year or so, a new tip would surface, the way they often do in cases like this. A sighting reported in another state, usually vague and impossible to confirm. A similar description posted on some missing persons forum online by someone convinced they had seen him working at a gas station or living quietly under a different name in a city hundreds of miles away. Each tip was followed up on as thoroughly as resources allowed, and each one, eventually, led nowhere. His wife never remarried. For more than a decade, She kept his old office chair in exactly the same spot in their home, worn armrests and all, saying more than once to friends that some part of her still expected him to walk back through the front door one evening, apologizing for being so late, as if none of it had ever happened. She raised their 2 children largely on her own, telling them for years that their father might come home one day, until eventually she stopped saying it, though she never fully stopped believing it, at least not out loud. To this day, no body has ever been found. There has been no confirmed sighting anywhere, no credible evidence of what actually happened in those 6 minutes between his front door and the corner store. Daniel's case now sits quietly in a filing cabinet in a small-town police station. One file among thousands of unsolved disappearances across the country, each one representing a life that was simply interrupted mid-sentence, with no ending ever written. What actually happened to him in those 6 minutes remains completely unknown. Maybe he was running from something no one around him ever knew about. Maybe something happened to him that no witness ever saw and no camera ever caught. Or maybe somewhere out there, in some town far from where his story began, he is still walking, wearing a different name, living a different life, having simply decided one ordinary Tuesday morning to keep going instead of turning back. Cases like this unsettle people not because of dramatic violence or a shocking confession, but because of the sheer, quiet impossibility of them. A man does not simply stop existing between his house and the end of the block. Somewhere, there has to be an answer. A car that picked him up. A decision he made and never told anyone about. A moment where something went terribly wrong and left no trace behind. But after all these years, no one has ever found that answer. And it may be that no one ever will. If you have a theory about what really happened to Daniel that morning, share it. Because these unexplained cases tend to attract people who notice small details that investigators sometimes miss. And if stories like this one interest you, real, unresolved mysteries told simply and honestly, there are more waiting to be told, each one just as strange and just as unfinished as this one.